that's where it absolutely blows me away. The best gift doesn't matter how permanent or temporary it is. If you know me well enough and you thought about it and you bought a gift that I would like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Like tickets to LouisCK.
I didn't buy tickets, to be fair. I bought a live stream. That's easy.
Yeah.
I was thinking about doing it anyway because I like Louis as a comedian. I ate too much before coming here, which was appropriate almost because I almost wanted to feel a little bit like the way Louis talks about his comedy before seeing this live stream. Welcome to the Forest Creek podcast. We just watched LouisCK live at Madison Square Garden. To be fair, we were not actually in New York. We watched the live stream, which is available right now on his website until February 17th. He performed last night, which was the 28th of January.
Yes.
And here we are the Sunday after. Okay, a little bit of background. Who is LouisCK? Very popular comedian. He started off as one of the principal writers under Chris Rock, or at least that's where people knew him from at the time. And then he took off, started to do his own stand-up comedy. It got more and more popular. People began to develop a little bit of a fan base around him. And then he got a chance to do a couple of TV shows. One that he did was more of a sitcom version, but he came back and basically did something similar. Like, a lot of comedians tend to do this. It's the show about you as a comedian.
Yeah.
What he did was he named himself Louis, but it's not Louis, it's Louie. So it's Louis as a comedian, not exactly LouisCK, right? But he's playing himself. He's basically, reenacting parts of his own life. Not to the T, but dramatizing it a little bit. They did like 4 or 5 seasons of that show. Around that time, again, he's becoming more and more popular. Every special that he continued to put out, whether it was hilarious, shoot up, sorry, they were all amazing. Like, when you can go on Spotify right now and find a number of his specials, at least you used to be able to. I'm not sure if you still can. And I remember I used to listen to him while I was like mowing lawns while landscaping. My first time I ever watched him was during a double spare block in high school. I just sat in the library and on my phone I watched LouisCK at the Beacon Theater on Netflix because that was my first exposure to him. And I'd never seen a special that was actually so immersive, right? Because he was one of the first comedians I'd seen where he did the black background, black clothes, and then the bits were engrossing. They like got you so immersed and they were in the imaginative space. Before that, my only exposures to comedy, like what I thought comedy was Jerry Seinfeld, Fluffy, and Jeff Dunham. Those were the guys I knew, and then LouisCK re-exposed me to comedy. Because it's so unlike all the other stuff. Like, that there's dirty comedians out there, but then Louis is something else.
Yeah, what's interesting? Because Louis, the whole thing is that he's relatable as a person.
Yes.
And
T, that if you had seen him just walking around, you'd not be able to distinguish him from any other stranger in New York.
And that's, if I remember right, he might have been the one that talked about this, but the whole idea of the way he even dresses on stage is that he's just a guy.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting because Seinfeld's comedy is a similar idea. It's that everyday person stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a completely different element because Seinfeld doesn't exactly go as deep into being a person as Louis does. Louis just kind of goes on the more to just paraphrase it, the evil side. But
Seinfeld is almost like surface and aesthetic by comparison.
Yeah.
It's minutia. Whereas Louis is, again, it immerses you so deeply because he's creating an experience and he's walking you through that experience rather than just Seinfeld's syntax kind of generation. Almost. Not to say that Seinfeld isn't a genius, because he definitely is. I have one of his books where it's just his material written down, and it's amazing how lean everything is. It's like 5 lines and it made me chuckle. Yeah. Just reading them. Yeah. So that's one thing, but then what Louis does is a little different. He just kind of brings you into the experience. Yeah. And it's a pretty amazing thing to watch. The thing that I've always found so striking about Louis is that, and especially when you watch him in interviews, like recently leading up to this special at Madison Square Garden, he did Joe Rogan, he did Theo Von's show, he did he even talked with Bert Kreischer for a little bit, like on a bunch of different comedy podcasts, and did a bunch of interviews. And it's so striking how actually intelligent he is, and how like read into the poetry of just human life he is. And even to the point where the show Louis is very well filmed, it's beautifully written. It's almost it's comparable to something like, I don't know if you've ever seen Master of None. Yeah, Master of None by Aziz Ansari. It was on Netflix for a while.
I do remember that.
It's dramatic like that and funny like that, and it brings you into experience like that. It's not like ha 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 laugh track kind of sitcom, but it's life of a comedian, and it's still very, very expertly made. It's very beautifully acted out. So he does something like that. More recently, he wrote, directed, produced a film with Joe List, who's another comedian, and it's not really a comedy movie either. It's just a movie about a guy who's like going through a divorce, and he's completely unsupported by everyone around him who kind of thinks that he's kind of lame or something. I haven't seen the movie yet, but from what I've heard, it's very expertly made. And when you hear Louis talk about filmmaking in general, this guy is like an artist, So it doesn't surprise me afterwards looking at his comedy again and just seeing how well he's able to take something that's very approachable and relatable to like he'll talk about food, he'll talk about getting old, he'll talk about just basic mundane human things, but he'll get you so engrossed with the way that he acts out his bits. Now, we can't talk about Louis without mentioning what happened that kind of took him off the air, and why this is the special to me, I think, is monumentous in comedy history for two reasons. He was canceled and came back, and he did it himself. Yeah. So number one, he was canceled in 2017 in the onslaught of the hashtag #MeToo parade, which did get real people like Cosby and Weinstein, but it also got people like Louis for some inappropriate actions he was doing. To put it short, and to, for any children in the room, he was inviting women that he worked with back to his room, where he would then ask for consent to expose himself to them for activity, not to do anything with them, but just to have them in the room as he did it. And there were a number of mixed reactions, but he was always trying to get consent, and then consent would either be given in a non-serious manner or it wouldn't be given, and that person would be upset by the experience. And I can only imagine it would probably be worse if you were like laughing and you thought it was a joke, so you jokingly gave your consent, and then whoa. Yeah. So that happened. Everything dropped him. FX canceled the show. He was basically just all over social media. People were like turning on him. It's a strange thing as a comedy fan to see, because it's like you almost don't believe that he's that bad. I think, like, when I heard it, I was like, that's on brand for him to do. Like, he never sold himself as a clean, moral person. That the fact that he would get himself stuck in an embarrassing situation like that, like, that's very Louis to me. So I was like, why is everybody surprised? Frankly, I'm surprised that it's not something worse. That it was something like that. It's kind of interesting. Like, when I mentioned it to you earlier, you thought he was charged with a crime. Yeah, and he wasn't. But anyway, he got canceled.
So was it literally just people on, like, there were nothing official was going on? It was literally just a classic social cancellation?
Well, a big part of the Me Too thing is people abusing their power dynamics.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking, because I was under the impression there was actual, like, legal stuff going on.
I think there might have been grounds for that. I'm not well read into it enough to know what actually happened with each one, but it seems like he came out the other side of it. Basically, he was just missing for 2 years. Yeah. People would talk about it in the background. They made a few jokes here and there. Patton Oswalt had a bit about it, where he's like, it's just a strange thing to request of people. Yeah. It doesn't seem like it would be attractive or interesting.
No.
Yeah. So that got lauded for like the year after. We had 2018, 2019, nobody heard anything from him, and then 2020 he comes back. Because the thing is, like, he never stopped. He kept working on material. I don't think you can stop to some degree. And to be honest, I feel like he handled it pretty well. You disappear for a little bit. In his case, he went to France, just lived a different life for a little while. Comes back, starts reappearing at the comedy clubs. People are like taking cell phone videos. I remember when I saw it on YouTube, there was a clip of he came back to a comedy club and was doing comedy, and I laughed. And I was like, he's still the same. And then he puts out a special called Sincerely, where he actually addresses it first few minutes of the special. He's like, how was everybody else's couple of years?
Yeah, oh my goodness, that was hilarious.
Which in 2020, you know, like when the pandemic hits, is like the pandemic time, especially like in 2020, that was like the perfect incubation period for you to introduce something new. That's why Andrew Schultz got really popular.
Yeah.
You know, and a number of other comedians, even Tim Dillon, because we saw him right before in person, and then throughout the pandemic.
He kind of exploded, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got much, much more popular. Even though he'd been on Joe Rogan before, but like he got more and more popular as things went on. We can talk more about Tim Dillon a little bit later, like we love to. But LouisCK comes back 2020, and then he just doesn't stop afterwards. It's almost like he's bigger now than he was before. Maybe it's because now he has that bit of a legend attached to him. But the other thing about this special that makes it really interesting is that he adopted the ethos of doing it all himself. Right? Because I kind of mentioned this maybe a little bit when we were talking about Andrew Schultz originally. That idea of not selling your content out to another middleman, right? If you have the email list, just do it yourself.
Yeah.
In Louis' situation, he did not rely on any third-party Ticketmaster. He just did it all through his own processing. To get his content, it's all accessible on his website, including the live stream that we just watched until February 17th, along with all the show Louis, which he just bought back from FX, along with all of his specials and a number of other pieces of his own content.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think actually his movie's up there too. So if people want to go find that, they can go on his website. But the interesting part about this marketing scheme, and Gary Vee talks about it, Vaynerchuk, well, he'll say, it's actually, you can't rely that much on these big networks to do everything for you. Otherwise, something happens or the algorithm shifts and you're no longer the popular thing to put up, and they will just stop, and then you're screwed. So the actual marketing scheme, what you want to do, and this is like, it seems like a no-brainer, collect emails. Collect the emails of the people who are interested in seeing you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Louis did that. He would collect people's emails because he was like, look at all these people going through these ticketing services, and the ticket service, the real money is that they have all these emails.
Yeah.
So if I had all the emails, I could just reach my fans, and that's what he does now. So you can sign up for Louis' email list, and through that you can find ways to attend his shows, and possibly you may have been at Madison Square Garden, although probably not if you listen to this show. Jared, what do you think of LouisCK before we get into this show?
I think he's pretty good. He's a great comedian.
Did you see much of his stuff beforehand?
Yeah, I knew I'd maybe seen a special. I wasn't like, I've never been a massive comedy super fan.
Yeah.
But same as any other comedian, I liked him particularly more because, I don't know, he's more relatable or something. I don't know. I find his comedy is pretty incredible. Especially that last one. I freaking died. That was amazing.
Yeah, we had a pretty good time at that special. So one of the things that he did for Madison Square Garden, which is interesting because Louis talks about, like, in the interviews beforehand, he was saying that he's no longer interested in doing the really big shows. He's like, I'm going to do the Garden, and then I'll have done the Garden, and that's that.
Has he never done it before?
I don't think so. Oh. No. He tells another story about it, but the point that he has now is that, like, I like doing the small clubs. I like doing smaller theaters. Big shows. The arenas were... Like, I was rewatching A Real Hero recently, like other specials, and you can hear their voices echo off into the distance.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I was doing the show, that would throw me off. I don't know how much I would like that. To say something and then hear in the background, it's finally reaching the upper end. It's so weird, you know, just to have a little bit of that time displacement. there's another story he was telling about this where he was saying that he went to go see a concert at Madison Square Garden for another artist. I forgot who it was, but it's a popular musician. And that he was thinking about how sad it was. That guy's pretty much ending his career here, and I might end my career here. And then hearing from a friend, it's actually the other way around. It's like, it's almost like a beautiful poetic thing that you are here attending this as you're getting a chance to sit here in the rows and see what it's going to be like when you're up there on that square.
Oh, yeah.
Madison Square Garden is an interesting stage because it's not like you stand and then the audience is all in front of you. You are standing on the square.
Yeah, they're all
and
around
the audience
you.
is all around you.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how I would like that. I don't think I would. I kind of like the audience to be in one direction. In the number of times I've been on stage. Whether it was doing stand-up comedy or something else.
Yeah, that would be strange. I've only done like plays growing up, but not having to think, I never even thought about it, but it's like the audience is always in front of you.
Yeah.
So you've always got a reference of they're over there. You're never thinking that they're also behind you and you can't see what's going on back there.
I went to Ashland, Oregon when I was in high school on a school trip because Ashland, Oregon is basically a play town. They have a lot of theaters there, and one of the theaters that we got to go see we saw Pericles, which is a play by Shakespeare, and then we saw another play, but it was very intimate because it was a smaller theater. There's a few hundred people in the audience, and then the way the stage works is that you have the back of the stage, and then you have like this kind of catwalk that goes out. And the actors spent quite a bit of time on the catwalk. And what's interesting is that they kept the props on stage minimal. Right? It's very minimal. There wasn't like a ton. There was no big sets. It was the actors doing very much what Louis does, which is like hold your imagination. Keep everything else minimal and just focus on me. Right? And that was really cool because it made the plays very immersive.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But Madison Square Garden, he's going to do the same material again, but in a proper special that will release elsewhere. Probably will be for sale on his website. So it'll be the same material, but it will not be the Madison Square Garden experience, which is limited time, like a one event thing. That was a lot of lead up.
Thank you for listening to the Forest Creek podcast. No.
As we mentioned, Louis very popularly raunchy. Kind of a dirty comedian.
Yeah.
One of the things that really sticks out is that he loves challenging jokes.
Yeah.
And he talks about this a lot in his interviews. He loves saying something and making the audience work through it. Like telling you something you're uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
Like, he'll tell a lot of stories about pedophiles, for instance, and just being like, ugh, it's uncomfortable. Right? But then getting you to a place where you started uncomfortable and then you start laughing. If you're a more conservative type of person, you might struggle through some of these areas. Yeah. In this one, he does quite an extensive bit about the Bible, which we'll talk about.
Oh my goodness, that was
shortly.
amazing.
And I mean, we're both Christian, and we found it hilarious.
Freaking killed me.
Yeah.
I was laughing before he even started because I knew what verses and stories he was going to talk about.
And and then he tells you, and then it hits even harder.
Yeah.
One interesting thing about his show at Madison Square Garden, he opened it with a performance by Ravi Coltrane and his trio. Ravi Coltrane is the son of John Coltrane, famous jazz musician. Ravi himself is like an excellent saxophone player, excellent musician, and he has with him his trio who are great. And apparently he'd ran into Louis a few nights before at a different comedy show and was just telling him, was like, hey, I found you really funny. And then Louis just spontaneously went, why don't you play the opening?
It was only a few nights before? That's
Play the
wild.
opening for me at Madison Square Garden. So the show opens with a performance by Ravi Coltrane's trio, which is actually like a short concert in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was straight up like, how did it? It looked like half an hour.
20 minutes at least. Like,
yeah.
They went on for quite a while.
Yeah.
And it was great. Like, they're really good. Followed by a performance from John Fisch. So a couple of openers. The openers in any comedy show, they're just, here's the chance to feature someone who is not as well known, but who the comedian who's opening likes. Maybe it's something thematic. Maybe it's something that's going to help enhance the main act. But they're here to loosen the audience up. So John Fisch, the first opener, when we watched him, being the opener's hard. You're not going to get as many laughs.
Yeah.
Right? But I feel like he was okay. He came on there. His energy didn't quit out at any point. I thought his bits were well devised. But if he did a couple things that kind of like got old, was that and got old for 10 minutes is not good.
Yeah.
Is that the main laugh he got was whenever he used the word Jew.
Yeah.
Which by the end of his act was a pretty big percentage.
Yeah. It felt like half of it, honestly.
Thinking back to it, it felt like a little too much.
Yeah.
It's becoming a bit of a crutch. I think if he'd come on and said the same bits with more energy, we'd get more laughs out of different areas. And we wouldn't think about that so much.
Yeah, because what's interesting is that all three of them, because my immediate thought was that he's making too many jokes about himself specifically, and so it's harder to relate to and harder to make a laugh out of. Oh yeah, that happens in my life, which is generally what all of this style of comedy is.
Yeah.
But when the other two talked about themselves, it didn't have that effect. It made me laugh and it was relatable.
It was definitely a very biographical set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that, like, I don't know, Louis also talks about his own life and himself.
We're just more interested.
It's got to be in a different manner, though. I'm no professional writer or comedian. But.
I think the issue that I had, like, I don't really care that the word that you use as the big punchline is Jew.
Yeah.
I'm not offended. If you're Jewish, do the bit. Mm-hmm. The problem is that, like, it's the only thing.
Yeah.
Right? By the end of it. If you put more energy into those bits, you can get more laughs throughout the joke.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't feel like we're putting so much weight and opportunity on that punchline.
Because he had some really good bits.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That did get us. We were both dying.
Yes.
It was great.
I think this may be just like I liked a lot that he was walking around and making use of the square.
Yeah, very much so.
Right? You need to be bigger to control a bigger room.
Mm-hmm. That's actually one thing. I don't know if it was Madison Square Garden, but Dane Cook has a stage essentially that he performs on. And I remember just watching one of Dane Cook's old specials, and he would literally walk from end to end constantly. He's like zigzagging around the entire stage. Yeah. And it's a similar setup in that it's like there's the stage in the center and the audience surrounding you.
Kevin Hart plays arenas.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Which matters even more if you're Kevin Hart.
Yep.
Not a big dude. But when it comes to John Fisch, it's good. Just more energy. Explode a little bit.
Yeah.
You know?
He had quite a few times where he just stopped talking.
Just worked your way through it.
Yeah, and then waited a little bit, and then went on to the next thing.
Pauses aren't bad.
Yeah.
Right? It's just be strategic.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
The lady who came on after him.
Adrienne something.
Adrienne something?
Yeah, it was Adrienne something. No, that was a character in that one of either her or Louis talked about.
I'm just gonna look it up.
Oh, it was her because she made a trans joke. It's like you still crap like a man. She's like, Elaine, you crapped 8 times today and half it's on the wall. Adrienne something.
Adrienne something.
Yeah.
We'll put it in the show notes later. Point being, she was really funny.
Yeah, I found her a lot funny. I think she had an advantage with us specifically because she had
a lot of her content was very much within what we find funny.
Yeah.
Right, like doing a bit about the Clintons.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't even see that coming from her.
No.
And
it was so freaking good.
Really good.
I loved when she was like, I don't want to be too rich. Don't get me wrong, I want to be rich. But I want to stop before it's okay to fuck kids.
I noticed I listened to our last couple stand-up reviews, and we just tend to regurgitate bits. So let's avoid doing that this episode.
Okay, take that part out.
No, but she does cover a wide range of topics.
Yeah.
They're all quite relatable and quite funny. She dares to go into some areas that people don't, like we mentioned, talking about transgender kids and all that. Even talking about pedophilia, talking about the Clintons, all this stuff. It's quite funny. She does a really good job. I thought it was interesting, though, that her energy that she brought to the stage was small club energy on Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that was probably the right move. Because if she's in Madison Square Garden, you got to do your absolute best.
Yeah.
If her best, tightest performance is club energy, do that.
Yeah.
Because if you don't want like half-hearted Madison Square energy with club material, it doesn't like that wouldn't have worked as well, I don't think.
It was appropriate. She was funny. I don't think it took away from the show.
No.
I feel like it could have just been delivered in a bigger way.
You know what? Thinking about it, the only thing it was really missing, I'd say, is movement.
Yeah.
Because she was clearly used to just
standing by the stool
Yeah.
next to your water.
The audience is directly in front of you.
I'm not even sure she took the microphone off the stand.
I don't know if she did,
I might be
but
wrong.
she didn't move around. She was standing still the whole time, whereas John
Yeah.
Fisch, what was great about his energy was that he was walking around, he was spinning, he was looking
It
at
helped.
everybody.
It helped a lot.
Yeah, and Louis was doing that constantly as well.
Yes.
But she just stood still.
Well, Louis had to move for his bits.
Yeah.
Which is something I love. Like, throw in a little bit of physical comedy.
Yeah,
You know?
especially when you have such a massive stage.
You
Like
don't
if
have to use
if you've got a
props.
tiny little club comedy stage, you don't need to incorporate physical
Yes.
stuff into your bits. You can, absolutely. You don't need to move a whole freaking lot. But
One thing I really love about the way that Louis opened, one thing, when you hear music and he comes on,
Mm-hmm.
was the Louis theme. Not necessarily his particular Louis theme, but you just heard that music play, and I was like, oh, okay. If
Yeah.
you've been in kind of touch with his material before, you would recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
He comes on stage, people are going nuts. They're really big fans. And that's funny that his first thing that he does on stage is apologize. It's not easy to be my fan.
it was such a good bit though.
Yeah, especially because, like, if you know what happened to him and the
Yeah.
history behind him
Yeah.
coming up here and the fact that all that happened to him and then he's still in the biggest place. Like, this is huge to
Yeah.
play in Madison Square.
Yeah.
Here he is. Every time I think about Madison Square, I always get it confused with Futurama's Madison Cube Garden. Which I was like, whenever I think about it, I always want to imagine like there's a big cube, like a glass cube that everybody's going. No, but it's not that. So he comes up there, he apologizes. It's like, it's not easy to be my fan. Let's go over some of the topics, but not actually the bits.
Yeah. Stray away from our classic content.
He opens with talking about the confidence required to be a comedian.
Yeah.
He goes from that into diarrhea, almost it was like straight into it, which is like, that's Louis. That's
Yeah.
very Louis.
Yeah.
It's funny enough, whenever he's talking, like, my least favorite Louis bits are the ones that are about bodily functions and sex. In general, I don't find sex that interesting to talk about on stage. Maybe it's just me, like, personally, like, I don't know, it doesn't feel that funny. It just feels a little bit like low-hanging fruit. So I don't always find that interesting. He still did a pretty good job out of it, just at a presentation. So he goes from talking about confidence to diarrhea to talking about, like, moral confidence.
Yeah.
Which I thought was awesome. Like, the way he uses it to touch on various topics, that he can, like, use that vehicle to bring us to places that we'd normally go, stop, you're canceled,
Yeah.
right? He
Yeah.
talks about Auschwitz and slavery within that first while. I always thought it was, like, such a great bit to talk about how the only reason you feel confident that you wouldn't have owned slaves is because
You
they're
can't
not
get one.
available.
It's not the current market.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting thinking about now? I guess, like, the massive difference between LouisCK and the other two comedians is transitions.
Yes.
Because, like you just said, he uses first joke as a vehicle for next joke and next joke and next joke.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I thought that John Fisch did that well because it was just biography, so it's easy to go one story to the next.
Yeah.
But when you see Adrienne come on afterwards, it's, I was in my car, I was on the bus, I was at the store.
Yeah.
Right? It's not much of a segue, which is fine. If you don't have a segue, don't do it. It's clunky. But
Well, because that's where her material was strong.
Yeah.
So it could handle that. But then you get the combo with LouisCK. His material is strong and he has amazing segues.
I love when people do that. When they use, like, a big story and then tell you jokes in between that story.
Yeah.
Or, like, famously, it was one of my favorite specials of all time is Craig Ferguson, I'm Here to Help. Because he starts with, I'm going to tell you one joke. And it's just a big lead up to this one simple joke.
Oh my goodness.
And it's not even, like, that big of a joke, but it's you, because you're in this vehicle. Now you're going to go through the whole ride. So Louis takes that ride to some wild places.
Yeah.
but he touches on them in ways that are actually really funny, like really light and easy, like digestible. I actually found this was a much easier special to work your way through than something else. Like hilarious or sorry are harder than this is. The way that Louis controls the room, like we were talking about, Madison Square Garden is really big. Louis, when you see him talk, it's something that works in a small club, you think. But I think the inflection and his tone and the way that he's able to like time the audience, so much more control. One of the things that really helps that with, and I heard him talk about this there was like a round table thing on TV where it was Louis, Bill Burr, Chris Rock, and Seinfeld.
Dang.
And the four of them were just talking about how to do stand-up. And Louis pointed it out, thanked Seinfeld for this piece of advice. He said, just stay in the bit. When the audience is laughing and they're still laughing, you feel inclined to stop doing what you're doing and let them laugh.
Yeah.
Stay in the bit. Keep that same emotion on your face.
Yeah.
Do not leave. That's another big thing that helps you control the audience, right? There's no, I'm going to stop what I'm doing now and then recover and then try again.
Yeah.
No, just stay where you are. They'll eventually die down for you to continue. And that's one of the things that really helps him control the room a lot.
Yeah.
He moves around, his bits get physical, the arms start to move, and like he's demonstrating things on stage. Again, without the flashiness of like, I've seen comedians put up slideshows and crap behind them.
Oh.
Not awesome. No, not like it's not that bad, but it's like, I don't want to look at your phone.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Don't show me a YouTube video.
Dude, check this out.
Check this out.
That's the comedian version of that. Watch this video real quick.
I'm not a huge Bo Burnham fan. I know that's like a heresy to say when you're, you know, to a millennial or Gen Z to not like Bo Burnham.
But
Is
he
it probably
did.
some kind
He
of
did
crime?
Inside on Netflix.
Shut up. But it's the same thing. I kind of find it annoying. Then I have to sing and I have to press the keyboard. It's shut up. It's like, just say the joke. You know, the fact that your imagination isn't strong enough alone, kind of, I'm going to stop. I'm not trying to hate on Bo Burnham.
This is
but
the Bo Burnham hate cast.
he goes from that to homelessness.
Oh, yeah.
His takes on homelessness are pretty funny. Because
oh, man.
one of the things that Louis does is that he'll start with an assumption that you already have that you might not know that you have, right? In this case, it was, we always want to help and fix and deal with the homeless. We don't actually want them in our homes.
Yeah.
Don't just come into other people's indoors, is the way he'll put it. He does the same thing for that, I was showing you earlier, this other bit he does where it's like, of course, but maybe.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
The nut allergies are terrible and they would have, you know, we should always be careful and protect the children, but maybe if you touch a nut and you die, you're supposed to die. Which is, of course, a terrible thing to say, but maybe there is a tiny bit of that assumption.
And that's what I was talking about in the beginning where I said he essentially dives into more of the evil side of people, because it's like not necessarily committing evil things, but everybody has thoughts like that. They all pop up, and he actually brings those to light and makes jokes about them.
Yes.
Whereas I think that's something Seinfeld would maybe touch on lightly a little bit, but he'd never go all the way deep.
Here's the big difference, I think, is that it's not that he's evil. I think that the source of his bits are entropy.
Yeah.
Whereas the source of Seinfeld's bits are order. Right? So Seinfeld is always joking about how orderly everything is, and within the order, and he's like, that's why his bits are very syntax heavy. One like term, line, and it's like mathematical every line that he's written out. It's very heavily based on order. Louis is in the entropy of it, and that's why his bits are way more poetic and very immersive, right? And also, if you're dealing with entropy, chaos and decay, whether it's of the human being or of the systems around him, naturally you can't keep anything sacred. And that's why he'll dive into slavery and Auschwitz and homelessness and all these things that we'd consider terrible, but can still actually work it out for us in the end, right? The thing that people don't know about him is that he's Mexican.
Yeah.
His father is Mexican. He was raised in Mexico at a young age before he came to the US. But when you look at him, you'd be like, he's Irish. He's got to be Irish. He's kind of ginger.
Yeah.
You know, he's older now, so it's like getting grayer and fader. But like, if you look at him when he was younger, it's like orange hair. And he's like totally white. Again, he looks completely in place in New York, just at the deli or something like that, right? It's not like a. You don't look at that guy and think he's Mexican. He talks about divorce. He talks about his dad being hard on him. He talks about abortion. So this is one thing.
Dude, that was so good. I think the way he goes about that, because he talks about abortion and religion and all these sorts of topics that everybody's divided on. It's either this or that. He's so good at not stating what side he takes.
Yeah.
But stating both sides at the same time. So you're like, oh, it's a joke that he said this side, but he also said that side, but he also said this side. So you don't know and it doesn't matter.
You know what I feel like when he gives his bits? It's like King Solomon going cut the baby in half.
Yeah.
Because it's I'm not taking either side. Here's my compromise, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's gonna force you to work this out.
It's so perfect because immediately when any of those topics comes up, regardless of whether you're a comedian or not, everybody's first inclination is, what side are you on?
Yeah.
Whose side are you on?
I always get so bored when they're like, oh yeah, I believe that trans people should be able to do whatever they want
my gosh,
on stage. I'm
it's
like, I'm
like,
bored.
Here's a joke about trans people, and now here's I would like to commemorate that this land is
It's
like in the middle of your bit. In the middle of your bit.
A non-political equivalent is the comedian who comes out and goes, "Oh, the ladies look good in the audience tonight." That's not a joke.
Yeah.
Say a joke.
Yeah.
Do a funny.
Yeah,
we don't
it's
need
like-
to hear this. We don't need to hear these blunt statements.
Yeah, it's good.
You know?
Like the way he goes about it is so like playing both sides and then giving you the absurdity is such a great way of going about it, because everybody wants to know what side you take, but as a comedian, that's not the point. You're making a joke.
Another thing about the way that this special is structured, and it's a similar way to a lot of comedians, big comedians, they'll structure their shows like this. They'll go from one big bit. They'll have big bits that are like the cornerstones, the anchors to their set. And then there's a bunch of little jokes in between. Sometimes it's bridges. They help fill up the time, or they might be thematic to what's going on, right? The travel section of when he's talking is very much that. Because it flits. Little joke, little joke, little joke, little joke. They're still immersive. They're still well written. They're quite funny. There are opportunities for him to get more colorful on stage. They don't add anything in particular to like the bigger theme. They're not like a giant bit on their own.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is evidenced by when you said the travel bits, I looked up and was thinking, the travel bits.
Exactly. They're not that memorable.
Yeah.
I noticed Joe Rogan doesn't tend to do them, and Dave Chappelle doesn't tend to do them. Seinfeld is almost all them.
Yeah.
Right? So it's hard for you to think of particular Seinfeld jokes. I think there's a lot of comedians who are quite similar. Louis does a mix. So he'll does a few big bits. The big bits in this one, you know, like abortion. There is morality. There is death. There is the Bible. But in between there's a bunch of
Yeah.
you know, and they're still really funny, but I'm not walking away out of the theater thinking about that.
Yeah.
Right. I think the same is actually true of like A Real Hero when we talked about that. Right. I think when we talked about Schultz, we found that a number of the bits.
Oh wait, that's Infamous.
Infamous. Yeah. When we talked about Infamous with Schultz, I think they were big bits. They were just disconnected. And also, there's a lot more crowd work with Schultz, so I don't really know how crowd work fits in there. There's zero crowd work in this one.
It was such a breath of fresh air that there was no crowd work.
Kind of refreshing. I'm not actually that interested in crowd work.
Yeah. Granted, at the Madison Square Garden doing crowd work,
it's almost too big for
it doesn't
crowd
seem
work.
like a thing.
If you're sitting in the back of the audience, you don't want that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like, look at this guy.
No. Russell Peters will do crowd work in a big theater and make it work. I think Fluffy does a little bit of it too, but you know, if the theater is big, just stick to your material. That's what me in row 181 want to see. It's like, just do the bit.
Yeah.
Do the funny. He talks about, so lots of travel bits, lots of airport bits. Death is a big one. And that really relates back to entropy. He talks a lot about getting old. He talks about a lot about dying. And I think that's it's been in his material before, but it's heavier in this one.
Mm-hmm.
The crossing the threshold of death and the lead up towards it, paired with the sentiment that they have in the U.S. about their own healthcare system, it's pungent. You know, it's potent. Sorry, it's potent to talk about, and he does it in a way that's kind of artful and ponderous. It doesn't go after death, right? He's not a particularly religious person. He doesn't spend a lot of time in that area, right? But it's still one of the heavier things. I think he represents getting old and dying and the lead up to dying in such a fascinating way, because he's like taking a look at it all. He's talked about, in previous specials, he's talked about taking his children to go visit their grandmother before she dies and talking to a doctor in the hallway to be like, why is her eye like that? And the doctor just nonchalantly going, well, she's probably got a bunch of tumors in her head. It's just like, well, what are you gonna do? We're gonna operate on her now?
Yeah.
She can't even, like, she's 80. There's no getting that brain back.
Yeah.
And then taking that kind of similar energy and to talk about getting old and stuff like that, getting old and dying in this. It's a pretty big section, right? Which is an interesting kind of like, again, it's on the theme about animals.
Oh my goodness, dude, his Zubik freaking killed me. That was amazing.
A lot of animals. I was listening, I mean, the Zubits were good. They weren't amazing. I was literally just listening to a Theo Von podcast, and his animal bits were like pretty similar.
Yeah.
Same topic, similar ideas. I just thought Theo's pitches on them were even funnier. You know?
The Zubit just killed me, man. It's like I'm gonna beat my kids if I don't see a monkey afterward.
What really got us was when he went, I've been thinking about Jesus.
Oh man, that freaking killed me, dude.
It's just a series of Jesus-focused Bible bits.
Yeah.
Talking about Catholicism, talking about the crucifix, talking about the variations that we see of the crucifix, talking about Bible stories. I've heard comedians quote the Bible. I've heard them make fun of the Bible. I've never seen a comedian bring a Bible on stage.
Nope.
Put on reading glasses and read passages.
Yeah. Literally reading verses in King James.
My parents would be upset.
Really?
If they saw that, they would be upset. They'd be like, this is too far. You're making fun of something sacred. But as we've established with Louis, nothing is sacred.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I guess, you know, if you don't believe, it's just a thing to you, you know? But even...
Well, no, because both of us believe, and that set was my favorite of... that bit was my favorite of the whole set.
I think what's different about the way you and me might consider this is that we actually appreciate his honesty about it more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I get it. You don't believe, and that this way of being honest about it is very entertaining.
Yeah.
And also because of our familiarity with it, we're familiar with where people tend to get tripped up about this stuff. It was really, really funny listening to him. He talks about the wedding of Cana. He talks about that story where Jesus talks to a fig tree.
Yeah.
He was talking about... He starts off, he brings up the Bible, and he's like, this is how much of it is talking about Jesus, and this is how much is not Jesus. And it's like... Very true. Very true that
amazing.
The Bible, the central book, is that, right? But it's supposed to be like, okay, this is the story of how we got. It's the longest prologue that you've ever seen. And it's supposed to become, it's laden with a lot of prophecy and things that come true in the latter half.
Yeah.
But to the outsider who looks at it, doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
2/3 is not about our central character, and then when we get to our central character, it's 4 tellings of the same story.
Yeah, that was freaking amazing. No, that's not how. Let me tell you one.
Mark was like, "You didn't get it. You didn't get it. Let me retell you everything." Yeah. So doing those bits and then talking about his background as having been raised Catholic, which a lot of comedians do. Again, it's nothing new. His portrayals of it are kind of funny.
Yeah.
Right? Because he does the basic bits about how, oh yeah, I'm Catholic, so I felt like I was going to hell and guilt and blah, blah, blah. But then he talks about his experiences of looking at the crucifix, and he makes a really funny point where he's like,
dude, that was amazing.
To be distinct, there's the cross, right, which is just the symbol.
It's just the cross.
And then there's the crucifix, which is when we see the cross with an image of Jesus on it.
Yeah.
Right? So It's really, I mean, a lot of Protestants don't typically put the cross up there. And the Orthodox tradition, we put a different shaped cross with like little crosses on the end of each end. But especially in Catholic churches and in a lot of Catholic-centric churches, you will see the crucifix.
Yeah.
One really funny bit that he brings up is like, if you had no idea what it was.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I love that he's like, it's in all the nicest places.
It's supposed to be, it's a very respectful, polite religion. Honor thy father and mother, but in the background, it's the most violent way in human history to die.
Yeah.
Like one of the most violent ways. I'm sure somebody will find Genghis Khan. Yeah, nerd. Listen. And to just see it so casually represented, almost casually, like it's sincerely put up.
Yeah.
But to an outsider, you'd be like, why do you have this on your wall? In many ways, it's so his observations about that kind of stuff is really funny. Yeah I want to go back and see more of Louis' stuff. I feel inclined to check out more of his work and more stand-up in general. Like, it's one of these things that's making me excited about stand-up again. Altogether, it feels like culture in general, like stand-up is coming back. Comedy is really coming back. We had, I think, there was a commercialization, because stand-up comedy was always big and it was always growing in a small way. There was a commercialization of it in the early 2000s up to around the President Bush era. The President Obama era is when people started talking about like politically correct and now cancel culture, right? Which both feeds and takes away from comedy at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? And took away a lot and made it difficult for a lot of smaller comedians to get up there.
Yeah.
And just the internet turned into a minefield for this sort of stuff. And then we had the pandemic where we're all inside and where we seem to have realized that we hate woke stuff. Where it's like we were actually quite bored and unhappy with woke stuff. We can't watch Velma. We can't. Sorry, Mindy Kaling. You were okay in The Office. We're done. We're good. We don't need any more of your life story. Do something else. Take a pottery. That's what Seth Rogen did.
Did he?
Seth Rogen now makes weed pottery for people. He makes ashtrays and baubles and stuff. And here's where you can rest your joint while you're smoking. Like, that's all he does now, apparently. A couple of movies here or there, but it's like, we're kind of sick of it. We want comedy again. There is room in the world for good comedy movies. And we're not talking about like the raunchy thing that comes out every couple years. We're not talking about the nth Kevin Hart movie. That's enough. But like, stand-up comedy is gonna be big again. It feels like the wave is surging again. You have Rogan building a comedy club in Austin, and Austin is becoming a new hub. Revitalize Vancouver. Let's flip some of these people. We have the Just for Laughs festival kind of thing where a bunch of comedians show up here. Great set of shows. Notably, February 24th. We're going to go see someone called Tom Dolan.
Yeah, I think I've heard of him before.
Tim Dillon. Very excited. We got tickets to go see him. So looking forward to that. But yeah, altogether, comedy seems to be on the rise again. We're seeing more and more people share clips. They're a little less afraid. The bits are more challenging. They're willing to touch on the touchy things. And I think it's just because, like, we're starting to see the culture pendulum swing the other way. And during the swing is where we're going to see the most action, not necessarily when it stops in one area. Because when it does that, that's when we get everything kind of centering. And people are afraid to say things that might cause it to swing. But then it swings again, inevitably. And during that swing is where we get a lot of interesting stuff going on. I've been doing a lot of talking.
Yeah. This is mainly your area of expertise, so.
Overall, LouisCK at the Madison Square Garden. Jared, what would you give it out of 10?
I want to just give it a 10. I mean, I was laughing the whole time. I mean, maybe, I want to say maybe there was a joke I didn't laugh at, but I don't remember.
I don't
know.
If I wasn't laughing at it, it was because I was looking at my phone trying to write a word down as a note. But
Like
some
the
of those,
whole
some
thing
of
was
those
freaking
bits
amazing.
hurt my face. I did not
Seriously.
expect to laugh that hard at some of these things.
Yeah.
The Bible bit
Oh my-
got me
dude,
so
seriously.
bad. I loved the wedding in Cana bit.
That was amazing.
Hilarious.
They don't have any wine, Jesus.
Rowan Atkinson, the guy who plays Mr. Bean.
Yeah.
Rowan Atkinson does a couple bits where he goes up and he does like biblical passages or pretends to be a priest.
Yeah.
One of them is he just does basically he pretends to be a Catholic priest. He's dressed up in the thing and he stands up there and he pretends to read from the Bible as if it was the wedding of Cana, and he goes, and they looked upon Jesus and they said, we have no more wine. And it just like kind of works his way through it. But this was funny. This was actually a lot more hitting.
Yeah, it was so good. I think for me personally, because the way he talked about it is exactly the way I think about it. That stuff when I read it.
I know, that was actually very true in the way that he did, because I've heard you say similar jokes about what you've noticed. And there are elements to the Bible that, hey, people on every side are going to get mad at me about this, but a little humorous.
Oh, dude, the Bible is freaking hilarious.
You think God has a sense of humor? As the creator of everything, creator of humor as well,
Yeah.
and doesn't think to put it in the central text,
Right?
It's in the text. It's there. Famously, Ari Shafir did a special literally called Jew,
Did he actually?
where he talks very centrally just talks about the Jewish religion and Judaism and Jewish philosophies and takes on it, because he did study like religiously, like as though to become an Orthodox person. And then he was in Israel doing those things. Then he looks up and he goes, I hate this. I'm going to stop doing this. But that's also a very good special on religious topics that people might find interesting if they also find these Bible bits fun. That being that, I think I would give this a 9. Like, I was coming in here thinking it's going to be an 8. I think it's closer to a 9. You know, maybe 8.7.
So what's that one point that you didn't like? What's the negative?
I can't put my finger on it. But I think a 10 to me is if I was laughing as hard as I was at the Bible bit at everything else.
That's a true thing, because that's the one thing where it's like the only reason I wouldn't generally give something a 10 is because nothing's perfect, and it's simply that thought as the -1.
I mean, if I was doing it for movies, John Wick is perfect. That's, you know, I said I'm totally entertained. I like the acting, I like the writing, the world is complex, the action is well executed, like something like that. I have a hard time thinking about what is a comedy special that I think is 10 out of 10. When I was younger, it might have been Louis at the Beacon Theater. Probably not the same now that I know the jokes.
Yeah. I think that's a good point, though. It's like it would be a 10 if I was laughing that hard at every single joke.
Which is really hard to do, but at least like most of them.
Yeah.
I think some of the jokes I was like, haha.
Yeah.
Which is normal.
Yeah.
Right?
There's
Normal.
always going to be a few jokes that are like, heh, nice.
And as specials go, this is really good. Like, really, really good. I'm really curious what it'll be like the more directed, more theatrical one that he'll do. Because those specials, like, a lot goes into them. And even in some situations, you'll see Louis do. Or, like, if you watch Bill Burr, lots of direction goes into
Oh, my
his.
goodness.
He did one that was in black and white before.
Really?
Yeah.
A special?
Yeah. He'll make these deliberate choices about
Like,
them.
was it actually... Did the black and white have a purpose, or did they just desaturate the show?
It was just kind of part of the theme. He did it in black and white, so no color.
Okay.
It was just part of the way he decided this is going to be the direction.
Yeah.
And they do the camera angles, and sometimes when they're putting a special together, they'll film multiple nights, and then in the editing room, bring it together into one special.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what that would be like in comparison to this. Maybe it'll even be more potent. I just thought the Madison Square Garden thing is the bigger one. And I'm glad we did it.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to doing more stand-up specials and reviews. Or we're looking forward to doing more reviews of stand-up specials here at the Forest Creek, including the live review. We're gonna see it live and then do a review.
No, it's a live review. We're gonna bring this setup to our table.
Imagine Tim being on stage and be like, "What are you guys doing? We're reviewing this show."
That wasn't a very hot bit.
No. We're like doing it like Twitch streamers,
You're
but
like,
we're there.
Talk about Epstein.
I'm really looking forward to that. I'm looking forward.
We should heckle him.
to more comedians. If you are a comedian in the Vancouver area and you'd like to come on the show, hit us up.
Boom.
We'd love to talk to you. We'd love to do some promotion for you. And we'd love for you to promote us. You can find us on Instagram and other social medias at The Forest Creek, on Spotify, The Forest Creek, wherever you get your podcasts, we're The Forest Creek, including theforestcreek.substack.com. You can contact us just to tell us what you think about our stuff. If you are a comedian, you want to reach out to us. If you want to reach out to us about any interesting stuff, we have a lot of cool stuff in the works. I say that again pretty much every episode, but it's always true. theforestcreek@gmail.com. You can also inquire if you happen to have a business or venture, or ministry or activity or dream that requires some media production. theforestcreek@gmail.com, and we will make your dream come true. We'll bring your vision to life with quality video and audio media. I love I've been listening to Cortex podcast recently with CGP Mike and CGP Gray and Mike, and just they have like a little chime at the end of their day. It's pretty funny.
Whenever you say you've been listening to Cortex, the only thing I know the word Cortex from is a daily software. So like the Cortex podcast.
Our website is coming as quickly as AD can slave away at it. theforestcreekweb.com, coming soon. Lots of exciting projects, like I keep saying, including videos that will be dropping soon. We just wanted to do this pod first and get it out there so that people don't miss this fantastic special. LouisCK live at Madison Square Garden. It is available for streaming on his website until February 17th. Keep an eye out, he'll probably do a special for it. I'm not saying any more about that, not even the URL until he pays me. Hear that, Louis? Anyway, this has been us. I'm Raph.
I'm Jared.